Your dog wasn't created by nature. The Victorians designed them to be your ultimate status symbol. You think you picked your pet for love, but history calls it the Victorian Explosion. They turned working animals into living accessories just to show off wealth. This pet-keeping culture changed biology forever. You are about to learn the dark truth behind that cute face on your couch. Let's dive in. The origins of modern dog breeds. You might think you know where your dog comes from. You look at that ball of fluff sleeping on your couch and think nature created it. But let me tell you, that is a comforting lie we tell ourselves. The reality is far more calculated and, honestly, a little bit unsettling. Before we dive into the Victorian era, we have to understand that for thousands of years, dogs weren't breeds in the way we see them today. They were defined by what they did, not how they looked. If it herded sheep, it was a shepherd. If it killed rats, it was a terrier. Simple, right? But here's the thing that might hurt your ego a little bit. Your beloved purebred might just be a Victorian invention. Leading historians and geneticists have pointed out that the vast majority of dog breeds we recognize today didn't exist a few hundred years ago. It's a bit shocking when you realize that we, humans, essentially terraformed the canine genome. We took functional wolves and turned them into biological clay. And here's the kicker, the part that keeps me up at night. We didn't stop at function. We started messing with their very biology, just to see what would happen. Imagine if someone decided your value was based entirely on the shape of your nose. That is essentially what began to happen. But what triggered this sudden shift from working animals to genetic experiments? To understand that, we have to look at one of the most explosive periods in human history. Defining the Victorian Explosion. This brings us to what experts call Victorian Explosion. It sounds like a military event, doesn't it? But it was actually a biological revolution. In the span of just a few decades during the 19th century, the number of dog breeds skyrocketed. It was absolute chaos, in the best possible way. We went from a handful of working types to hundreds of distinct breeds. I remember reading a study from the University of Manchester that described this era as the invention of the modern dog. It's fascinating, but also kind of terrifying. It wasn't evolution taking its slow, natural course over millions of years. No, this was rapid, industrial-scale breeding. It was the Victorian equivalent of fast fashion, but with living, breathing creatures. They were obsessed with categorization, with putting everything into a neat little box. But be warned, this wasn't just innocent curiosity. There is a darker side to this explosion. When you start treating living things like products on an assembly line, things get weird. You start prioritizing aesthetics over health. You start creating animals that can't breathe properly just because it looks cute in a painting. Have you ever looked at a bulldog and wondered why it looks like that? That is the Victorian fingerprint. They treated biology like a canvas, and sometimes they painted with a heavy hand. But why did they suddenly want so many different types of dogs? The answer lies in a massive cultural shift. The rise of pet-keeping culture. This is where pet-keeping culture enters the chat. Before the Victorians, having a dog just to hang out with was seen as, well, a bit eccentric, unless you were royalty. Dogs belonged in the barn, not in the bedroom. But then, something shifted in the collective human psyche. The rising middle class suddenly had disposable income, and more importantly, leisure time. It's actually quite similar to how we treat technology today. You don't need the newest iPhone, but you want it because it fits your lifestyle. Back then, bringing a dog inside the house was the ultimate lifestyle flex. I mean, think about it. You are telling the world, I am so wealthy, I can afford to feed a mouth that does absolutely no work. It's a power move. But here is the unsettling truth they don't teach you in history books. This love for pets wasn't just about companionship. It was about control. Humans love to dominate their environment, and what better way to show dominance than to take a wild predator, shrink it down, put a bow on it, and make it sleep at the foot of your bed? It sounds harsh, but historical sociologists argue that this pet culture was a way for the Victorians to reconnect with the nature they were destroying with the Industrial Revolution. A bit ironic, isn't it? As we moved further away from the wild, we dragged pieces of it into our living rooms. transforming workers into companions. So, how did we go from a wolf hunting in a pack to a cavalier King Charles? Spaniel sitting on a velvet pillow? This transformation of workers into companions is perhaps the most dramatic shift in animal history. The Industrial Revolution meant machines started doing the jobs dogs used to do. We didn't need dogs to turn spits for roasting meat anymore. We had engines. We didn't need as many dogs for protection. We had organized police forces. So thousands of dogs were suddenly unemployed. I know, it sounds funny to say a dog is unemployed, but it's true. They faced a crisis of relevance. And this is where it gets risky for the dogs. In history, when an animal loses its utility to humans, it usually goes extinct. But dogs are master manipulators of human emotion. They pivoted. They rebranded. Instead of guarding sheep, they started guarding our emotional well-being. But let me ask you this, is it fair? We took animals bred for high-intensity work and forced them into a sedentary lifestyle. It's like taking a Navy SEAL and making them work as a greeter at a grocery store. They are going to have some pent-up energy. Many behavioral problems we see in dogs today, anxiety, destruction, stem right back to this moment in history where we stripped them of their purpose. But for the Victorians, it wasn't about the dog's purpose. It was about the owner's design. Designing dogs for the elite. Now we get to the really snobby part. Designing dogs for the elite. You have to understand, the Victorians were obsessed with class. And nothing says class like customizing nature. This is the era where dog shows began. The first formal dog show took place in 1859, and it changed everything. Suddenly, a dog wasn't valued for how many rats it killed, but for the perfect slope of its back or the exact shade of its coat. And you want to talk about celebrity endorsements? Let's talk about the ultimate influencer, Queen Victoria herself. She was the Kim Kardashian of the 19th century when it came to trends. If she liked breed, suddenly everyone had to have one. She helped popularize the idea that dogs were fancy. She had collies, pugs, Pomeranians. Because the Queen loved dogs, the aristocracy followed suit, and then the middle class tried to copy them. But here is the dangerous part of designing for the elite. When you breed for exclusivity, you shrink the gene pool. You start inbreeding to keep the bloodline pure. It sounds like a horror movie plot, but it was reality. They were so obsessed with creating a brand-name dog that they ignored the biological consequences. And we are still paying the vet bills for those decisions today. It makes you wonder, are we loving these animals, or are we just loving the aesthetic? The dog as a status symbol. This leads us directly to the concept of the dog as a status symbol. In the Victorian era, your dog was an extension of your outfit. It was a signal to the world of who you were. Walking down the street with a rare purebred Borzoi said something very specific about your bank account. It's like driving a Ferrari today. You don't drive a Ferrari because it's the most practical way to get groceries. You drive it to be seen. I remember reading a diary entry from a Victorian socialite who practically had a meltdown because her neighbor bought a better spaniel. It's petty, but it's human nature. The status symbol became the primary driver for breeding. This is why we have so many weird and wonderful shapes and sizes. They were fashion accessories. But watch out, because this mentality is a trap. When a living creature becomes a status symbol, it becomes disposable. If the fashion changes, does the dog get discarded? We see this even today with trends like the purse dog, or the sudden spike in husky ownership after Game of Thrones. It all goes back to this Victorian obsession with using dogs to climb the social ladder. It turns a bond of friendship into a transaction of vanity. But what happens next? Will surprise you. Because this vanity actually cemented the dog's place in human history forever. How society shaped canine history. Finally, we have to look at how society shaped canine history. We are living in the shadow of the Victorians. Every time you register a dog with the Kennel Club, every time you talk about purebred versus mutt, you are participating in a system set up by guys in top hats 150 years ago. They codified the dog. They wrote the breed standards that we still religiously follow today. It's actually mind-blowing when you stop to think about it. We have let a society that didn't believe in germs and thought ghosts were real dictate the genetics of our best friends. But in a way, they saved the dog. By integrating them so deeply into the social fabric, by making them a status symbol and a key part of pet-keeping culture, they ensured that dogs would survive the modern age. So, the next time you look at your dog, realize you are looking at a living historical artifact. They are a product of the Victorian Explosion, a remnant of a time when we decided to rewrite nature to suit our egos. It's a complicated legacy, full of love, vanity, science, and a little bit of madness. But honestly, I wouldn't trade my little Victorian-designed mutant for anything in the world. And I have a feeling neither would you. Now you know your pup is a piece of history. Hit that subscribe button on ChickaPaws for more hidden truths about your best friend. Which breed history should we dig up next? Let us know below.